the Forbidden Blender.
It's out there. That's all the old man would say. He repeated it over and over again, staring out the window of his trailer, his eyes bugging out. He had wrapped an old t-shirt around his stump of an arm as a tourniquet to staunch the bleeding. He's old, so it's sad. But Christ, I need the product now, not later. A friend of a friend of a friend said this guy was legit, so I paid him up front, like an idiot. I stopped getting updates on day 2. Thought the old weasel skipped town, but here he was. The small bundle of cash I'd given him for services rendered was still on the stacked up beer cases next to his fridge. Reese's Pieces wrappers littered the floor. The guy couldn't get enough of them. If the gator didn't take his hand, the diabetes would have taken his feet. By the looks of it, he found it. It was wilier than he thought, and now he's left-handed whether he likes it or not. As bad as it was for him, it's worse for me. Last thing I need is a bunch of angry Chechnyans shaking down half of Miami looking for me. My Czech isn't amazing. Is it Czech or Chechen? Whatever. I knew how to say yes, no, and don't push me into the fish pond. Can't imagine that working miracles for me as I'm dangled above a wood chipper. Still, any of those would work better than, "No, I'm sorry, Vodka, I don't have your albino alligator. I have a Publix gift card. Does that work?" I slammed the busted door of the filthy trailer behind me as I stomped over to my car. Within 10 seconds of me stepping into the full sun, my shirt was soaked through. A refreshing 104 degrees with 300% humidity. The paradise that is Florida. I got in the car and punched in the address. Gotta salvage this. I pulled up to the little shack by the water. A faded sign that read, "Jimmy's Fanboat Tours" lay on its side, propped up against the shack. The only person in sight was a shirtless man with long hair. He was sitting on the ground, drinking a beer, a weird mix of house music and country blaring from his cell phone on the ground next to him. I approached him. He didn't get up. I asked if he was Jimmy. He smiled. I could count his teeth on one hand. Promising. I asked if that was his boat, pointing to the creaky-looking monstrosity tied up to the dock. He nodded. I asked if he could take me out tonight. He nodded. I told him I'd meet him back here around 1 a.m. He cracked another beer and cranked the volume up higher as I turned around and left. I checked the time. 1:05 a.m. The moon cast jagged shadows through the cypress trees looming around me and my car. Where is Jimmy? He looked like he sleeps out here. I held makeshift ice packs to my thighs, Ziploc bags filled with rapidly melting ice chunks from the gas station ice machine. Turns out, Vodka knew my routine better than I thought. 2 of his boys, over 6 foot, over 300-pound chunks of meat in expensive suits, held me down in a chair while Vodka had some quality time with me. Turns out if you cut a bullwhip in half, wrap those halves in sandpaper, and then wail on somebody's thighs for 3 hours, they bleed a lot. I was not so secretly hoping that Jimmy didn't show up. It'd give me some more time to not walk. My clumsy stitches threatened to tear at the slightest movement. Then I heard the telltale sound of a beer cracking open and knew my partner was here. I opened the car door and gritted my teeth as I stepped out, feeling razor blades bounce around in my quads. I called out to Jimmy. No answer. Moments later, his gangly form moseyed out from the darkness. His weird mishmash accent assaulted me as he helped me get the gear out of the trunk. "We're looking for gators, huh?" "Not gators, Jimmy. Gator. One. A white one." I gave him the nets and the rope to load into the boat. "Oh, you was trying to find that slippery albino gator, huh?" "Yup." I tossed him a small envelope of cash. "You get the other half when we're done." He smiled. His mouth looked like a crossword. "Will this thing run?" I asked aloud as Jimmy untied his rusty fan boat from its moorings. He simply smiled that winning smile. I took that to mean yes. With me, Jimmy, the gear, and Jimmy's tiny cooler loaded into the ancient-looking fan boat, we took off into the glades. Even with the light of the moon, it was hard to make out anything around us but the water and swamp. Oh, I'm sorry, river of grass, according to Jimmy. He wanted to make that very clear. Occasionally, I'd whip the floodlight attached to the front of the boat in a random direction, trying to spook whatever imaginary Looney Tunes I thought might be following us this late. Would Vaca send his idiots out this time of night? I'd thought he'd sent a pretty clear message with my filleted thighs. All the light revealed were those eyes, bobbing around in the water, 2 at a time. Gators. They all floated there, calmly, lazily. They were an upside-down, starry sky, all those eyes shining back at us. Dinosaurs that managed to stick around after all their relatives got nuked by the asteroid, or aliens, or whatever. Right now, they just look like really dangerous furniture, just floating there. I scanned the area. Just regular gators. The white one was nowhere to be seen. Frustrated and bored, I tossed one of Jimmy's discarded bottles into the premature collection of floating handbags. It dinked off of one of their heads, then splashed into the water. A frenzy broke out. Leathery tails whipped around and jaws snapped. Their tiny brains convinced a squirrel was going night diving and it was their big chance. "Best not be messing with the gators there, boss." Jimmy's weird southern fried accent spilled out of his mouth like gravy. "Why's that, Jimbo?" I asked, readying another bottle, aiming at a particularly big, stupid-looking gator. "'Cause they don't like it." Jimmy said this as if it answered all the follow-up questions I might have. Right. I swapped my bottle for a net and harness as we shot along the water, sliding deeper into the glade. As we zoomed along, the fan boat motor shattering the silence, something caught my eye. I told Jimmy to dock it over on the side of that island thing. Reeds, maybe? Once we were in position, I leaned out of the boat and snatched up what got my attention. Reese's wrapper. We're close.